Hi guys, my name's Deb Marnie and I'm from Aussie Maille. Welcome to our chainmail tutorial channel. Hey there guys, a big hi, hello, welcome. Thanks for popping in today and spending part of your time with me. So today I'm doing the second kit in our February Mail Club subscription box. Link below if you want some more information on our subscription services. So this one this time is a pendant using a European 4-in-1 wrap around a cabochon, a gemstone cabochon. Call this one Nimbus, because to me the final product looks a little bit like rain falling I should say, from a cloud, which thankfully we've got a little bit of rain today, so that's really nice. Alright guys, let's just stop babbling and jump straight into it. Okay guys, so as you can see, here are a couple of sample pieces of the pendant that we'll be making up today. So coming up on the screen now are a list of all the tools and components that you're going to need to make this pendant up with. So screenshot it, stop it, write it all down, whatever you like. Otherwise it will also be down in the description tab for you. Okay, so while I've got you here, I want to talk a little bit firstly about this tutorial and how it will work. Now, because we're using gemstone cabochons, they're not calibrated gemstone cabochons, so there is the possibility for a wide range of variants. Even though these are supposedly approximately 20 millimeters and about 6.5 millimeters in depth or width, thickness of the cabochon, however you want to say that, you can see here by some of the samples that I've got that there is quite a lot of variation, or hopefully you can see it, there's quite a lot of variation in the shape and the thickness of the cabochons that I received. So these are a dyed rippled jasper cabochon, and some of them have quite a sloped edge, some of them almost come straight up, some of them are quite thinner. So although with this tutorial I'm going to give you some basic counts and ideas to make up these cabochons in these wrap, it is only just a base for you guys. You may need to or you will most likely need to do some trial and error mailing of your own in order for this to fit your particular cabochon. By doing this and understanding how this works, you'll be able to take this idea and put it around various different size cabochons. It doesn't always have to be this 20 millimeter size. You can take this idea and apply it to any of your larger or even smaller cabochons if that's what you want to do. So I just want to make you very aware that I don't guarantee that this is going to work absolutely perfectly every single time if you're using a 20 millimeter cabochon. Just because gemstone cabochons, or cabochons in general in my experience, aren't always calibrated, aren't always the same. Okay, so I just want you guys to be aware of that as we go into this tutorial. Okay, so to start this project off, I'm going to take my cabochon and I'm going to measure the circumference of my cabochon. So to do that, I just take a strip of paper, and you can see I've already got this one marked up from a previous wrap. But all I do is I take that and I wrap that around the outside of my cabochon, marking approximately where that piece of paper where they overlap. So you can see that's about the same there. So these cabochons, it's about 6.5 centimeters in length. Okay, I'm going to use this a little bit later just to measure my starting strip of mail. So you can just set this aside for the moment and set the cabochon aside. We're done with that. So what we're going to do now is we're going to create a strip of European 4-in-1. Now I am doing this with the actual ring IDs. These are 20 gauge 0.8 millimeter ID rings, and they've got a ring ID of 2.75 millimeters. So guys, these rings are small, so I do apologize in advance if I get my fingers in the way. If you need to learn how to do European 4-in-1, if you haven't done it before, there'll be a link up here in the top sending you to other tutorials that I've done for European 4-in-1. So if you do need to see how that is done and you are having difficulty seeing it here with these tiny rings, then by all means jump on, watch one of those videos first. Make sure that you can do European 4-in-1, and then you'll be able to come back here and continue this tutorial. So I've already tested this particular cab size, and I found that on average I need about 33 pairs of rings closed to do the initial middle bit. So I would suggest going ahead and either closing all those up now, or you can close a good handful of them up before you start this weave. I just find it's easier if you've got these rings pre-closed. It is one of the few weaves that I do where I recommend pre-closing a handful of rings. So once you've got your rings pre-closed though, what we're going to do is we're going to build that middle strip of European 4-in-1. So to do that, take up another one of these rings, the 2.75 millimeter ID rings, and for the purpose of this tutorial, these are actually going to be considered our large rings. We are going to use a slightly smaller ring than this. So take up one of your opened large rings, and onto that I want you to pop 2 of the rings that you have pre-closed in advance. So then you're going to close your ring up, so you've got this little chain here, and then I want you to take up a twist tie or a paper clip, a piece of wire, whatever it is that you have on hand, because you're going to need a little bit of a handle here. The rings are so small, you're going to need something else to hold on to. So feed that through your center ring, give it a little twist so it all holds together. And then once you've done that, I want you to separate out those 2 rings there like this. And I want you to consider this little formation here a little bit like a mouse, okay? So there is our mouse's ears. This center ring here is his forehead, and his forehead is facing us, right? We don't want him turned around the other way where he's being a naughty mouse and his nose is in the corner and we can see the back of his head like this. We don't want that. We want his forehead to be facing towards us. So once you've got your rings in that position, take up another one of your opened large rings, and you're going to take this ring and we're going to feed it down through the front of the ear on the right side. Okay, we're going to go through the front. We're going to give it a little twist, and we're going to bring our ring up through the back of the ear on the left side. Okay, once you've done that, before we close our ring, we're going to take up 2 of those pre-closed rings. We're going to pop that onto our opened ring, and then we're going to close that up. Okay, and then we're going to position those rings like we did before, so we can see the mouse's ears and his forehead. Okay, and that is basically European 4-in-1. We just do that step again. So once more, take up an open ring, feed it down from the front to the back in the right ear. Okay, so down like that, give it a little twist, turn it around, bring it up through the back of the ear on the left side. Okay, so you come up through the back, and then before you close it, we pop on 2 more of our pre-closed rings. And that's it, guys. That's European 4-in-1. And we need to keep going until we've got a strip of this. Now, as I said, if you're using these particular cabochons that come in the kit, you'll need to make your starting one 33 pairs of these closed rings. If you aren't making one with this cabochon, or your cabochon happens to be a bit bigger than this, then this is where our strip of paper comes in handy. So you've got your piece of paper here that you've measured out the circumference of your cabochon, and you can see when you hold your piece of maille up against this, it's obviously much longer. But what you need to keep in mind was when it's around the cabochon, it's actually pretty scrunched up. So what you want to do is you want to scrunch this weave up on itself so it's, you know, pretty dense. It's not all stretched out. And when you do that, we want this to be somewhere around this length that we've marked off. Now, as I said, this is not going to be perfect. This is only approximately. Now, I hope you can see this. It's a little difficult with our camera to show this. But basically, when you scrunch it up, you want it to be pretty close to that length that you've marked off on your paper. So scrunch it up nice and good. I'll see if I can show this to you a little bit better. When you scrunch it up, you want it to be sitting up pretty much on top of itself. Sorry, this is a little difficult to do. This camera is a little limiting. Let me see. So just excuse this piece of paper. I'll put this on and then I'll scrunch this up. Okay, so it's nice and dense. And then hopefully you can see, oh, it's not the best, guys, I'm really sorry. But it gives you some idea of the length that you need this to be. So as I said, for this particular cabochon, about 33 pairs of pre-closed rings works well. And then once you've got that, what I'm going to do now is actually close this loop on itself. So to do that, I'm going to remove that twist tie from the end. I'm going to try and reopen my beginning ring, which I'm having a little trouble finding. Normally when I use rings this size, I'll be using a magnifier. I don't have a magnifier in my setup here. It's too difficult. I think that might be it there. It's just too difficult with all the camera and lights and microphones and everything. So bear with me, guys, here. Yep, all right. So there we go. So my joins and things may not be great, is what I'm saying, but bear with me while I do this. So I've opened my ring up a little bit. I haven't let it go. I'm bringing the other end up and I'm positioning those rings in pattern. Now make sure that you don't twist your maille piece, that it's nice and flat. And I want to continue weaving my opened ring into this piece here so that it keeps the pattern. So what that means in this case, I'm going to go down through the front of the ring here on the left, and I'm going to come around and go up through the back of the ring on the right there, and I'm going to close this up. And then when I let go, you can see that the join was around there, and you now can't tell where I started this particular piece. All right, so once you've got this joined together, I actually want this to be 4 rows wide. I've joined it now because it's just easier to place that one ring in joining rather than 2 if we'd made this an extra row wide. So I'm going to go ahead now and pop in a 4th row here. So to do that, I'm just taking up another one of our large rings, and I'm going to pick any spot, doesn't matter which spot you pick to start with, and I'm going to go through 2 of those rings, just like that. Okay, I'm going to close that up. And your work should look like that. And I'm just going to continue all the way around my work, adding an extra ring. So this time I'm going to pick up one new ring here, one ring that isn't in the weave already, or this row already, and I'm going to pick up this ring here from the previous pair. So again, picking up 2, so 1 new, 1 previous. And to keep this in pattern, I need to slip in behind that first ring there. So just remember to keep this row in pattern. And we just keep doing that, guys, all the way around. So again, taking up another opened ring, going down to our next new ring, picking it up and picking up one of the previous rings, closing it up and moving down to the next one. So guys, if you go ahead and do that all the way around your work so that you've added another row to your piece, and I'll meet you back here to show you how we start contracting this down and fitting it to our cabochon. Okay, so you can see I'm nearly back at the start of adding this extra row in. So I just want to show you how to finish this up. You just need to make sure that this row is continuous. So you don't want a gap like that there. You want to make sure you close it all the way up. So to do that with your final ring, in this case we need to go in front of this first ring here that we started, but in behind for this one up here, so that we make sure that we keep our patterning correct all around the edge. Okay, so there we go. We've got the base chain in place, and as you can see, this is still way too big for our cabochon. So we're going to start contracting this down. So to do this, we want to take up another one of our rings that we've been working with, our 2.75mm ID rings, and we're going to do what we did before, except this time we're going to go through 3 rings and we're going to close that up. So our first ring there has gone through 3 rings. Our next ring is going to go through 2 new rings and 1 old ring. Okay, so 2 new rings and 1 ring from the previous set. And close that up. So we just want to do that all the way around our piece again. So remember, pick up 2 new rings and then 1 ring from the previous set. Okay, and this will start contracting it down and it will allow it to fit over the cabochon a lot better. So if you guys go ahead now and continue adding your contraction row in, and I'll meet you back here to show you what we need to do next. Okay, so I'm nearly at the end of our contraction row, and you can see how this is cinching our maille in. So I've got another space here to do another full contraction. So I'm going to go through 2 new rings and then through 1 old ring, as I have been doing. And then you can see here that our ends aren't quite joined and I don't have that 2 new 1 old ring pattern to deal with. So what I'm just going to do here is I'm just going to pick up 1 ring from each end. So I'm going to pick up our first ring here at the beginning and I'm going to go in through the back here and pick that up, and then I'm going to go pick that one up there and I'm going to close it up. So basically we just want to make sure that we close it up and it's got a continuous row of rings. However many rings you have left over there will depend on how many rows you've got, which depends on how big your cabochon is. So as I said in the beginning, this is just like a basic recipe, like a basic pancake recipe. And you'll need to add your bits and pieces to suit your individual requirements. Okay, so I've made this first contraction here. And you can see when we put this on now, it's going to sit on top of our cabochon. It's not going to fall off like it was before. And when we flip it over the other side, you can see that it's still very loose on the other side. But when we fold our rings up, they just come up just a little bit over the edge. Okay. And what we want to do now is put another contraction row in place. Now at this stage, if you're worried about whether or not your cabochon is too thick and this is not going to actually hold it in place, you can add an additional 5th row to this edge here before you start contracting. Okay, so that's totally up to you. If you've got a really thick cabochon, and that one's pretty thick, you can see if I put a thinner cabochon in, oops, if I put something that's a little bit thinner in, when I pull it up over the edges, it pulls up a little bit more than the other one was doing. So if you've got a really thick cabochon and you're concerned about it, you can add an additional row before you start contracting, or you can contract it down, see how it's going, and then you may have to take those contractions out and add an additional row. As I said, it's all part of the fun and games of there being so many variances with natural cabochons. So I'm just going to go with this slightly thicker one here, and I'm going to see how this goes. So I don't need to put the cabochon in place just yet. I'm going to start contracting up the other edge of our maille piece, and I do that in exactly the same way as I did what is the front. So I'm just going to go through 3 rings, close it up, and then of course my next ring takes up 2 new rings and 1 of the previous rings. So we're just doing exactly the same as we did before, guys, going around your work. This time though, you'll want to stop before you've completely closed it up. So you'll want to leave, you know, a gap of where you need to place maybe 3 to 4 rings, depending on the size of your cabochon and the shape of your cabochon. So if you go ahead, guys, and start adding some of these contraction rows or contraction rings, and I'll meet you back here to show you how we're going to slip that inside and finish it up. Okay, so I've added that contraction row in until I've got about 3 rings left to add, and I can see that this is going to go over the back of the cab like I want, but it is going to be a bit tight. So if you're concerned about the tightness, like I said, you can add a 5th row. You'll probably find though that you'll then have to cinch it up even more later on, but I like these to be nice and tight and firm around my stone. So this is quite tight. Now it is a little fiddly to add these last set of rings in and try and keep the cabochon in place. I don't have any tips or tricks for you guys, except to be as careful as possible. All right, so I'm just going to add these last couple of rings. Again, I'm sorry if my fingers get in the way. These are tiny, tiny rings, and I need to keep my hands on the cab, on the wrap, to try and keep it all into place. So I'll do my best so that you can actually see what's happening. But please bear in mind that I'm working in a tight situation with small rings. Okay, so we've got that in there. We're nearly done. I just want to try and wriggle the cab around a little bit more. As I said, you can see how very tight this is. All right, I need to place another ring in there. So I need to pick up 2 new and 1 from the previous set of 3. So you're going to need your smallest nosed pliers that you've got to do this. So you can see how very tight this is at the moment, and I just need to place 1 more ring now to join my ends together. Okay, so I'm just going to grab one more ring, and I just need that to go through one ring from the last triple and this ring here from the first one where I started. Okay, hopefully you can see that. I've got to go through this ring here and this ring here. So this is very tricky and very tight. And you may call me lots of nasty names while you're doing it, and I'm sorry about that, but if you want the wrap to be nice and tight, this is the way to do it. If it's too tight, then you may want to consider, as I said, adding an extra row, or you can take your work apart and add, where we had 33 pairs, you might want to actually do 34 pairs. So, or 35 or 36. It really does depend on your cabochon, and I can't predict that for you guys. It is, you may have to actually undo a whole heap of work to add some rows back in, because at this stage it's just our best estimate. All right, so I'm going to close this up hopefully soon without me killing anybody in the process. So this is really tight. Okay, so there you go. That wasn't easy. I'm not going to lie to you here. This is not a project for a beginner mailer. This is probably not, if you've never worked with rings this small, this is probably not the best project for you either. It is tricky and it can be frustrating as you work in tight spots, or you find that you have to undo your work. Now, I could get that in and get that closed, but you saw it took a little bit of effort, and that's a really tight fit. Okay, I don't need to do anything further with this wrap. It's a nice tight fit, doesn't need me to cinch these rings down anymore. If though you do these 33 pairs of rings and you find it's a little bit loose, and that may happen with like this cab here, it's a little bit, as you can see, it's a little bit thinner than this one over here. You may want to add some additional rings in the back. So I can show you with, say, this one here. So this is one of the thinner cabs, and you can see that I had to add some additional cinching rings here in the back of my piece. So to do that, I just picked up, you know, one set of 3, put a ring in there. Because I didn't know how much I would have to cinch this down, I sort of did another one over here, then I did one up here, one up here, until this became tight enough to fit around my cab and it didn't move. So you may just put 2 in and you may be happy with that. You may need to put a whole heap more in. You can see here I've only had to put 4 in. So this particular one is quite a thick cab, and I had to add extra rows, extra length to this one. So this doesn't have 33 pairs. I think this one's got more like 35, even 36 pairs in it. It ended up being quite chunky, and I had to take it apart enough that, you know, to undo the loop, add some extra pairs of rings into our base chain, bring it all back up again, and then when I got there, I decided it was a little loose. I mean, it's a trial and error thing. But to cinch it up, I only needed to place 4 rings. I didn't need to place rings all the way around like I did this one here. Okay. Now, this one I actually did the 5 rows, the extra row of rings in. And as you can see, even going in and cinching it up at the back, there is still a lot of movement in this cabochon. So I probably didn't need to do 5 rows of rings on this particular cabochon. And, you know, I may even want to go in and try and cinch that up even more. but I was just testing to see how it would go. So if you're happy with it being a little bit loose, it was certainly easier to put together like this. Then go ahead and add that extra row, so that's extra width to your piece, rather than this one here where I added extra length to it so that it went around this way a little easier. Anyway guys, this is a little confusing. The best I can suggest is you give this a go. If you're using, especially the cabochons that we supplied with our kit, if you're using these, they're about 20mm diameter cabochons, you start with 33 pairs of rings, of those pre-closed rings. It's a really good starting point. You may find that you have to maybe add one more if yours is a bit thicker, or you don't like struggling to close that last ring like you saw me doing. Maybe you want to try 34 instead of 33, and then you'll be able to cinch it down at the back if that is what you want to do. But anyway guys, that's the wrapped cabochon. We're going to set that aside for the moment, and I'll show you what we do next to finish up our Nimbus pendant. Okay, so the next step is to take some of this Rolo chain. So this is 3mm Rolo chain, and I cut that into 5 pieces. One piece is approximately 4 centimeters in length. The other piece, 2 other pieces are 3.5 centimeters, and the final 2 pieces are 3 centimeters in length. And then to the end of my piece of chain, or each of the chains, I attached my little, in this case, a fan charm, and I used the 2.5mm ID rings. So attach a charm to each of your pieces, and then what we want to do is we want to add these to the cabochon that we just wrapped. Okay, so again, we want to take up the 2.5mm ID rings, and we're going to use that to attach the chains to our cabochon. So I just take up the first one, the longest one first. I'm going to feed my 2.5mm ID ring onto the other end of that chain. And then I'm going to take this up, and it really doesn't matter to me where I do this. If there's a particular way that you want your cab to be, because there's a pattern or something in there, keep that in mind. You'll want this to go in the middle of whatever way you want this pattern to be. If you don't have a preference, then it doesn't really matter. But what you want to do is you want to come down here onto the edge, and you want to choose one of these rings, okay? And you just want to feed your opened ring through one of the rings that's in the weave. I've chosen to make it one of the rows that is more towards the back of my piece rather than right here on the front. That is up to you where you would like yours positioned. I just happen to think towards the back is a little bit better. It's not right on the back. You can see I haven't got it right here on the last row before we start contracting. I've got it on the one prior to that. So once you've placed your center ring, or center chain, we then want to place our others. Take up your next longest piece of chain, pop a 2.5mm ring on that, and then come down here, and we don't want to put this into the next ring that's in weave. We want to skip that one and go into the next one. So we're going to put this one in here and close that up. Okay, so it looks like this. And then we want to place the next ring, the next piece of chain, which is the smaller again length. So these are the 3 centimeter lengths of chain. And again, we skip the next ring directly in the weave, and we go up to the one after that. And we close that up. And you can see that we've got this happening, and we want to do that on the other side. I'm just going to flip this over towards the back. How you do this is totally up to you guys. There's no right or wrong way how to add the other side. So I'm going to open up my ring. I'm going to grab the next piece, the next longest piece. So this is the second longest piece. I'm going to go to not the next one, but the one after that. So remember, we've got to skip one and put our ring in there like that. Okay. And then we just need to add our final piece of chain to our cabochon. So grabbing that, feeding it onto our opened ring. Okay. So we want to skip one ring, go on to the next one, feed it through there, close it up, and there you go, guys. Oops. And then what we just want to do now is we want to place our veil. So to do that, we want to go as centered, you know, as centered here as we can across to the other edge. We're going to take up another 2.5mm ID ring, and we're going to feed that through the ring in the weave as we did before. So this one, I try to put it towards the center of your wrap as much as you can. I'm going to put it in there. I think that looks good. Okay, and then before I close that, I'm going to pop on my bail. I'm going to close that up, and I'm actually going to double this ring up. That's totally up to you whether you want to double that ring or not. I just feel with it being a 20 gauge ring that if I can double it up, it's probably a good idea because it's supporting all the weight of your pendant. So again, I'm just going to go through that ring that's in weave, through my bail, and close that up. So doubling that up, again, is totally up to you guys. I just feel it's a better idea so that you've got double the width supporting the weight of your pendant. So that's it. So the next step then is just to get your chain, feed it through the bail, and you've got yourself, oops, more thumbs and thumbs today. Feed it through and you've got yourself a sweet, sweet little necklace. So as I said, I called it Nimbus because it kind of reminded me of rain coming out of a cloud, which we've been pretty desperate for here up until recently in Australia. So I sort of thought that was a great name for it. There you go, guys. There's your Nimbus pendant. Okay guys, well that's it. That's the tutorial for today. I hope you enjoyed it and it has given you some ideas on wrapping cabochons of your own. If you did like the tutorial, don't forget to give it a thumbs up, share, comment, subscribe if you haven't already. And don't forget also, while you're here, to check out some of the other content that we've got on our channel. Along with, guys, don't forget to give our shop link up here a little bit of love. This is where we sell all the bits and bobs and the thingamajigs that you need to make this project and many others. And the more love you give our website, the more likely we are to keep continuing these videos. All right, guys, thanks again for popping in, and I hope to see you again sometime in the very near future. Bye now.